What happens when the very principle that holds the world together is broken? You wake up every morning assuming that gravity will hold you to the floor. You assume that sunlight will be warm. You assume that if you speak a word, it carries a meaning. You operate on the silent, invisible assumption that cause follows effect, that up is up, and that reality is a cohesive, singular narrative. You take the architecture of existence for granted. But what if the architecture failed? What if the invisible glue that binds the atom to the molecule, the heart to the chest, and the sun to the sky simply evaporated? We are not talking about a war. We are not talking about a plague. Wars and plagues happen within reality. We are talking about the collapse of the container itself. We are talking about the moment the equation resolves to zero. In the ancient libraries of the Nile, the priests knew that the universe was not a solid object. It was a performance. It was a delicate, vibrating song that had to be sung continuously to keep the darkness at bay. And the conductor of this song, the sheet music upon which the stars were written, was a force they called Maat. To the uninitiated, Maat is often described merely as a goddess, a woman with an ostrich feather in her hair. She is called the goddess of truth, justice, and order. But this is a simplification for children. To the high priests of Heliopolis, to the magicians of Hermopolis, Maat was not a personality. She was the operating system of the cosmos. She was the physics of integrity. She was the specific frequency of vibration that allowed matter to exist without dissolving back into the primordial soup of Nun. She is the reason the planets spin in orbits rather than crashing into one another. She is the reason a lie feels heavy in the chest. She is the reason the Nile floods on time. She is the cosmic law of balance. But there is a story buried deep in the forbidden indexes of the temple archives, a story that was whispered only during the darkest eclipse. It speaks of a time when the impossible happened. It speaks of a moment when an ancient, forbidden ritual, pulled from the deepest, most dangerous chapters of the Book of Thoth, was enacted by a priesthood drunk on desperation, a ritual designed to hack the system, a ritual meant to bend the truth. And in that moment, the impossible occurred. The feather of Maat did not weigh against the heart. It wavered, it broke. And for a terrifying, agonizing epoch, the universe began to collapse into contradiction. Truth bent, time fractured, justice reversed, the horizon dissolved. This is not a story of a battle between gods. This is the story of the moment the scales of the cosmos tipped into freefall. This is the chronicle of the fall of Maat. To understand the horror of the fall, you must first understand the miracle of the structure. You must understand the lattice of reality. The Egyptians viewed the universe as a bubble of order, floating in an infinite ocean of chaos. Outside the bubble was the Nun, the dark, watery, chaotic void where potential exists but form does not. Inside the bubble is the world as you know it. The bubble is maintained by surface tension. That tension is Maat. Maat is the living lattice behind existence. Imagine a golden grid, infinite and microscopic, that runs through everything. It runs through the stone of the pyramids, through the waters of the river, through the light of the sun, and through the moral decisions of the human soul. It is the connective tissue of being. When an Egyptian looked at a tree, they didn't just see wood and leaves. They saw Maat expressed as biology. When they looked at a king, they didn't see a ruler. They saw Maat expressed as governance. When they looked at the horizon, they saw Maat expressed as geometry. She is defined by her symbols, and each symbol is a key to a cosmic law. First, the feather. It represents lightness and truth. But why a feather? Because truth, in its purest form, carries no burden. A lie is heavy. It requires energy to maintain. It requires memory, defense, and construction. Truth simply is. It is aerodynamic. It floats on the breath of the divine. The feather of Maat is the standard weight of reality. If a soul is heavier than the feather, it is because that soul has become dense with falsehood, heavy with the entropy of chaos. Second, the scale, the cosmic balance. This is not just about judging the dead. It is about the law of exchange. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. For every action, there is a reaction. The scale of Maat ensures that the universe remains a closed system of perfect accounting. If you take, you must give. If you destroy, you must build. The scale ensures that the books of the universe always balance to zero. Third, the straight line. Maat is often depicted standing on a plinth, which represents the primeval mound of creation. This plinth is flat, level, and straight. In a world of organic chaos, the straight line is the imposition of will and order. It represents the path of the sun. It represents the rectitude of moral behavior. To walk Maat is to walk the straight path, to align your spine with the axis of the world. And finally, the horizon, the Akhet, the point where the sky meets the earth. This is the ultimate symbol of equilibrium, the marriage of the spiritual, sky, and the material, earth. As long as Maat reigns, the horizon is clear. The distinction between gods and men is maintained. The distinction between day and night is rhythmic. Maat is the rejection of randomness. In a universe governed by Maat, nothing happens by accident. Every event is a syllable in a sentence that makes sense. But here is the terrifying metaphysical secret that the priests guarded. Maat is not maintained by strength. She cannot be enforced by the muscle of Ra or the violence of Set. She is maintained by integrity. She is fragile. She is a consensus reality. She exists because the cosmos agrees to follow her laws. She is not a wall of stone. She is a tension of surface water. And if you touch the surface with enough malice, if you introduce a vibration that is purely dissonant, you do not just break the law. You break the water. You shatter the reflection. Any manipulation of her essence threatens reality itself. And that is exactly what happened when the Book of Thoth was opened to the wrong page. The Book of Thoth is not a book in the way you understand it. It is not a collection of stories. It is a collection of source code. It is the documentation of reality written by the architect himself. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic, wrote the book not to control the world, but to describe it. But Thoth, in his infinite curiosity, did not just write down how the world works. He explored the theoretical limits of how it could work. He wrote down the equations of potentiality. He calculated the physics of the impossible. Deep within the darkest scroll of the book, protected by spells of blindness and madness, exists a ritual known as the reversal of the feather. This was a theoretical equation. It was a thought experiment. Thoth asked himself, what if the standard of truth could be inverted? What if the feather could be made heavier than the mountain? What if the outcome could dictate the truth, rather than the truth dictating the outcome? It was a ritual designed to make Maat bend for one specific outcome, forcing justice to favor the unworthy, forcing truth to conceal itself, forcing destiny to be rewritten by the will of the ego rather than the will of the cosmos. Thoth wrote it down as a warning. He noted in the margins that this formula results in a logic loop that would crash the solar bark. He sealed it away, but knowledge, once written, desires to be known. And in the late hours of a dying dynasty, a priesthood, desperate, corrupt, fearful of losing their grip on a crumbling empire, found the ritual. They were not trying to destroy the world. Evil rarely sees itself as evil. It sees itself as necessary. They believed that if they could just tilt the scales slightly, they could save their king. They could reverse a famine. They could ensure their power for another 1,000 years. They thought they could perform a surgical strike on reality. They thought they could bend Maat just once and then let her snap back into place. They gathered in the crypts beneath the temple of Hermopolis. They did not use the traditional offerings of bread and beer. They used offerings of paradox, water that had been boiled but was cold, stones that floated, words spoken backward. They chanted the incantations that Thoth had encoded as warnings. As the high priest recited the final syllable, the air in the chamber did not grow hot or cold. It went dead. The hum of the universe, the background radiation of divinity that permeates Egypt, stopped. In the hall of judgment, deep in the Duat, the feather of Maat sat upon the golden scale. Suddenly, it shuddered. It turned gray, and then, for the first time since the moment of creation, the feather did not float. It sank. It crashed down onto the plate of the scale with the weight of a dying star. The ritual was complete. The reversal had occurred. The anchor of reality had been pulled up, and the world began to drift. The collapse did not look like an explosion. It looked like a hallucination. The first signs were subtle, which made them all the more terrifying. It began with the water. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, the most reliable force in the human experience, hesitated. The current slowed, and then, defying gravity, defying the slope of the land, defying the will of the ocean, the water began to flow backward. It flowed south, back toward the mountains, back toward the source, as if the earth itself was trying to retract its gift of life. Then came the shadows. In a world governed by Maat, a shadow is the faithful servant of the object. It is a projection of truth. But as the lattice fractured, the shadows detached. People would walk down the street, and their shadows would remain standing still. Or the shadow would walk in the opposite direction. Or, most horrifying of all, a man would cast the shadow of a jackal, or a woman would cast the shadow of a flame. The link between the object and its consequence was broken. Lies became indistinguishable from truth. This was not just a moral failing, it was a physical one. If a man stood in the market and said, "The sky is green," and he believed it with enough force in this broken reality, the sky flickered green for him. Objective reality dissolved into subjective madness. There was no longer a shared world. There were only millions of solipsistic bubbles bumping into one another. Crops grew in darkness and withered in light. The biological instructions were scrambled. Wheat sprouted roots into the air and buried its heads in the soil. Time, which is usually the steady heartbeat of Ra, began to skip. A day would last 100 hours, then the sun would race across the sky in seconds. Moments would repeat. You would drop a cup, see it shatter, and then find it in your hand again, only to drop it again, trapped in a loop of causality that had nowhere to go. But the greatest horror was in the Duat, the underworld. The mechanism of judgment failed. Hearts weighed against the now heavy feather could not be judged. The scale tipped wildly. Saints were thrown to the devourer. Murderers were ushered into the field of reeds. The moral accounting of the universe was bankrupt. The gods were thrown into confusion. You must understand, the gods use Maat to function. Without Maat, Ra is just a ball of fire without a path. As the order crumbled, Ra's solar barge began to flicker and stall. He could not find the track of the ecliptic. He drifted aimlessly in the sky, burning too hot, then fading to a dull ember. Horus, the god of the horizon, the god of perspective, went blind. Not physically, but conceptually. He looked out and could not find the line where the earth met the sky. It was all a blurred, gray smear. He lost his sight of the future. Isis, the great magician, found her spells dissolving in her mouth. Magic requires the structure of language, and language was losing its grip on meaning. She would speak a word of healing, and it would cause fire. She would speak a word of binding, and things would fall apart. And Set, the god of chaos, the god of storms, you would think he would be rejoicing, but even Set requires Maat. Set represents controlled chaos, the necessary storm that clears the air. But this was Isfet. This was the uncreation. The storms that spiraled out of the desert were not storms of wind and sand. They were storms of void. They were erasing existence. Set howled at the wind, but the wind did not know him. We were drifting into Isfet, the world without Maat. Isfet is often translated as chaos, but that is too energetic a word. Isfet is entropy. Isfet is the lie. Isfet is the state of non-being. The psychological consequence on the human population was absolute. Imagine living in a world where nothing can be trusted. Not the ground beneath your feet, not the sun in the sky, not the love of your family. Communities dissolved instantly. How can you have a society if contracts mean nothing? If a promise carries no weight? If the past changes depending on who remembers it? The social fabric, which is woven from the threads of Maat, unraveled. Decisions lost meaning. Why plant a seed if the harvest is random? Why raise a child if the future is a void? Why be kind if justice is a roll of the dice? The human mind began to fracture under the strain of absolute unpredictability. People fell into a catatonic state. It was a mass psychosis of indifference. The internal compass, the heart, was spinning wildly. There was no true north. Dreams and memories blurred. You could no longer tell if you had actually lived your life or if you had dreamt it. A mother looked at her child and couldn't remember if the child was hers or a figment of a fragmented timeline. This is the existential horror of the fall. It is the realization that sanity is not a property of the mind. It is a property of the universe. We are sane because the world is consistent. When the world goes mad, we follow. The silence that fell over Egypt was heavy. It was the silence of a clock that has stopped ticking. It was the silence of a heart that has stopped beating. The great machine was broken, but the gods, despite their confusion, are guardians. They cannot accept the void. Thoth, the author of the disaster, was the first to act. He was horrified. He watched the theoretical nightmare he had penned becoming flesh. He realized that intellectual vanity had almost cost the cosmos its life. He threw down his scroll. He smashed his stylus. He understood now that truth is not something to be experimented with. It is something to be served. He organized a cosmic expedition, a rescue mission for reality. He called upon Isis. "We must find the fragments," he told her. "The truth has not been destroyed. It has been shattered. It is scattered in the dark dimensions." He called upon Horus. "You must find the axis. Even if you cannot see the horizon, you must remember where it was. You must hold the memory of the straight line in your mind until the world aligns with you." And he called upon Set. "You are the only one who can survive the storm. You must go into the Isfet. You must fight the nothing." It was a terrifying inversion of roles. Set, the villain, became the vanguard. He stood on the prow of the stalled solar barge, and he screamed at the darkness. He fought not with weapons, but with sheer will. He pushed back the encroaching void, carving out a space for the others to work. Isis descended into the metaphysical cracks of the world. She went into the distortions, the places where logic had failed. She gathered the shards of Maat, a moment of kindness here, a fulfilled promise there, a memory of justice. She wove them together with her magic, trying to recreate the pattern of the feather. Horus stood at the center of the world, closing his blind eyes, and visualized the order. He imposed a mental grid upon the chaos. He became the living anchor. Together, they tried to force the feather back into alignment. They tried to grab the scales and physically level them. They used all their divine power, the fire of Ra, the magic of Isis, the strength of Set. But it didn't work. The scale would not balance. The feather remained heavy. The river continued to flow backward. Thoth, in his wisdom, finally understood the error. He looked at the sweating, desperate gods trying to muscle the universe back into shape. And he realized the terrible truth. Maat cannot be forced. You cannot make something true. You can only be true. Truth is not a conquest. It is a surrender. The ritual had broken the world because it tried to dominate Maat. Trying to fix it with dominion was only adding to the imbalance. She must be invited. She must be restored through alignment, not power. Getty Images. The restoration would not come from the gods alone. The gods are the architecture, but the mortals are the residents. The house cannot stand if the residents are tearing down the walls. Thoth appeared in the dreams of the high priests, not the corrupt ones who broke the world, but the humble ones, the scribes, the keepers of the door. He appeared in the dreams of farmers, of mothers, of bricklayers. He gave them a single instruction: live the truth. It seemed impossible in a world of chaos. How do you live the truth when the sun is flickering? But the instruction was clear. The final restoration began at the primordial lake, the Nun, where creation began. The gods gathered there, stripped of their weapons, stripped of their arrogance. They stood in silence, and they began to speak the negative confessions, not as a judgment, but as a prayer. I have not spoken lies. I have not stolen. I have not caused pain. As they spoke, a vibration began, but the real power came from the earth. Across the broken land of Egypt, mortals began to act. A farmer, seeing his neighbor's crops wither, shared his own grain, even though he didn't know if he would starve. That was an act of Maat. A judge, sitting in a crumbling court, refused a bribe, even though money meant nothing. That was an act of Maat. A builder laid a brick and used a string to make sure it was straight, even though the ground was shaking. That was an act of Maat. These were small, microscopic acts of integrity, but each act was a stitch in the fabric of reality. Each honest word lightened the density of the world. Each fair exchange recalibrated the scales. We think of cosmic battles as lightning bolts and explosions, But the battle for Maat was fought in the quiet moments of the human heart. It was fought by refusing to give in to the chaos. It was fought by holding on to the straight line when the whole world was a curve. Slowly, agonizingly, the light began to return to the heavens. The river slowed, stopped, and then, with a rush of joy, began to flow north again. The shadows snapped back to the heels of their owners. The sun found its track. In the hall of judgment, the feather of Maat, which had been heavy as lead, began to tremble. As the collective integrity of the world rose, the feather shed its weight. It turned white. It lifted. The scales swung, up, down, oscillating, searching. And then, with a sound like a perfect crystal bell ringing across the universe, it settled. Perfect balance. 0-point energy. Maat rose from the scale. She did not look like a warrior. She did not look triumphant. She looked sorrowful. Her dress was torn. Her wings were bruised. She had been violated by the greed of those who thought they could cheat the laws of existence. She looked at Thoth. She looked at the gods. She looked at the mortals. And she issued the last teaching, a teaching that is etched into the bedrock of the human soul, even if we have forgotten it. The world does not fall because truth is broken. Truth cannot be broken. The world falls because truth is abandoned. She did not punish the wicked. The chaos they had endured was punishment enough. She simply resumed her place. She became the horizon again. She became the gravity. She became the hum. The hum returned. The silence was filled with the music of the spheres. Reality solidified. But the world was different. It was fragile now. The people knew, in a way they never had before, that the ground beneath their feet was not a guarantee. It was a gift. They knew that the sun rose only because the balance was kept. This brings us to the reflection you must carry with you. We live in a time that feels very much like the fall. We see truth bending. We see justice becoming a game of power. We see the words we speak losing their meaning. We feel the shadows detaching. We look for a hero to save us. We look for a Ra to burn away the darkness, or a Thoth to write a new code. But the lesson of the fall of Maat is that the hero is not coming from above. The restoration does not come from a grand ritual. It comes from the feather. Maat is not a goddess to worship. She is a way to walk. She is the decision you make when no one is watching. She is the refusal to lie when lying would be easier. She is the choice to be fair when being unfair would make you rich. Every time you speak the truth, you are solidifying the ground you stand on. Every time you act with integrity, you are reweaving the lattice of reality. You are keeping the stars in the sky. And when we stray, when we decide that truth is flexible, that justice is optional, that the ends justify the means, we are not just breaking a rule. We are performing the reversal. We are inviting the void. Maat is waiting. The scale is waiting. The feather is light, but it is the heaviest thing in the universe. Do not let it fall. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, I understood it.